Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the May 7th, 2024 Board of Education meeting to order, and we're going to start with our budget public hearing. But before we start with the public hearing, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So tonight we have a really busy night. We're going to first do the presentation of our proposed budget, and then we'll be following that with our board candidate forum. And then after that, the board will go back to the boardroom for our regularly scheduled board meeting. We will have this recorded until we move to the boardroom for the regularly scheduled meeting. I'd like to start by introducing Dr. Lori Arlojo and Assistant Superintendent for Business, Matt Damerl, to share our budget for this year. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So we'd like to begin, as we usually do this time of year, with the goal that we have district-wide in regard to our budget, which is to provide a quality program in a fiscally responsible manner. And the reason for that is approximately 42% of our budget is paid for by our local community and taxpayers. So the Board of Education and our staff is very much aware of that implication, as well as this year specifically as we look to what items we included and priorities of the budget. The federal funding that we've had through the pandemic is ending this summer. So some of our positions and resources were funded through this money, and that money is no longer available to us. And in addition, 3 of our towns, Sweden, Ogden, and Chili, have been reassessed, so that we know many of our families have seen a large increase in their home assessments and subsequently very concerned about their taxes. So again, keeping all of that in mind, along with knowing that we want to stay within the tax cap, which Matt will address in a little bit of what that is. We've decided, the board has decided, and recommending a 2.77% increase in our budget, which is the same as last year. Although our contractual agreements and things of that nature are a little bit higher than that, we've decided that we would use our reserves, or our savings accounts, if you will, in order to offset that increase, again, because we're very concerned about our community and ability to pay taxes in this environment. So the budget this year includes some state aid, not as much as we had hoped for, and Matt will address that. Some salary savings. We are able to continue the lottery-based UPK. That is a separate funding stream from the state. We're very happy and pleased that Churchville Elementary will be able to offer a second classroom. So we'll have 2 classrooms at CES, 1 classroom at Fairbanks Road, and 2 classrooms at Chestnut Ridge. And right now, Julio and Renee out of the Office of Instruction are working with a local daycare provider to see if we might be able to offer 1 more section of UPK. While it would be off-site, it would still be aligned to our district program and curriculum and resources. So in addition, we are looking to add a school nurse, hoping that you recognize the needs of our children. Medical needs have increased greatly over the past several years, so we do have a need for that. The Learning Center, which provides support services for children who have attendance plans, medical needs, out-of-school suspension or in-school suspension. The state has changed the requirement of tutoring hours, has increased what they are able to have, so we needed to add an additional person, which we actually did this spring. So obviously that was not in the original budget because we were not aware of that requirement at that time. Further, with the needs, academic needs of our elementary children through the advocacy of our elementary principals and our Office of Instruction, the Board of Education looked at some data and did agree that it would be important to add a 1.0 math intervention teacher at each of the elementary schools to assist in that area as well. We also are looking to add a health teacher and art teacher at the middle school level, expand some opportunities for accelerated art to earn some credits a little bit earlier in middle level. Right now we're only able to offer 1 class prior to middle school starting the day. This would allow some opportunities during the day. And we also have added in the budget an L position. So we do have some influx of students that are coming that do not have English as their primary language. So we will actually monitor that a little bit closely. We have several students at Chestnut Ridge that are currently in 4th grade coming over to the middle school. So some of that staff may come over with them, but we're going to monitor that a little bit over the summer and fall. And if we do need to hire that position, we will. And if we don't, if that fluctuates or changes in any way, then we'll just keep that set aside for when we might need it this year. We're also going to add a 612 special education program at Fairbanks Road this coming school year. And with that comes the speech language needs. In addition, our UPK, K, and 1st grade teachers have seen increase in needs of speech language services for our children, given that they hadn't had those early resources over the past several years. So we are looking to add a speech language pathologist as well at the early level in elementary. And last, many of our high school students, we've had an increase for those attending the CTE program at Wamoco at BOCES, as well as some students that are in some outside placements for some more support, program support, and other academic need. So in order to have the budget match the number of students that have increased in those programs, we've added some money to the budget for that as well. And Matt's going to talk about the budget picture.
Hi everyone. So next year the proposed budget is $103,303,515. Compared to the current year budget, it's an increase of just over $4 million, or 4.08%. The notable thing about that number is that's just below inflation. So the inflation for the prior 12 months was 4.12%. So we're right in line with rising costs that you see. A lot of the drive in that, obviously, the biggest expense for the school district remains salary and benefits for staff. That drives the majority of the increase. The other piece that's notable in this year's budget is we are fully committing to paying cash for our diesel buses. So there's an increase of about $500,000 directly attributed to that. How we're paying for that as a brief overview, we've seen revenue, including our state aid, go up. $1.8 million. The state piece of that is much smaller than it's been in the last 2 years. Appropriated fund balance, as Lori alluded to, the board made a decision to allocate money out of our savings accounts in order to keep the tax levy low. So we have an increase of 61% in our fund balance allocation, so we're up $1 million in that area. But that's a purposeful thing just to help stabilize the tax increase that we're expecting. And obviously the tax levy itself is, as Lori said, 2.77% increase on the tax levy, which is the same increase that we saw last year. In terms of the numbers that make up our budget, the components that comprise it are roughly the same. So there's 3 large pieces to our budget. There's program, which covers everything in the classroom, and transportation. And that makes up 72% of our budget. Last year it was 72.45, this year 72.18, so roughly the same amount. Our capital component, which includes all the physical building, things like that, that's seen an increase primarily due to insurance costs going up. We've seen increases in our premiums. And also our school buses are in that section of the budget. And then our administrative component, which covers district-wide administration as well as our BOCES administrative costs, are included in there. And so across the board, from last year to this year, the composition of the budget is roughly the same. Vast majority remains in program. Capital is the next, and administration remains the lowest piece, although it did move around a little bit. That's it for there. Estimated revenues. So the way that we're planning to pay for the budget, this is, as of today, this is our best guess of how we're going to receive funding to pay for this $103 million budget. So state aid is the majority of our revenue, makes up over 50%. Over the last 3 years, that number has increased quite a bit. We traditionally have seen the state aid and tax levy kind of share the burden of the school district's expenses equally. In the last 3 years, more of that shifted to state aid, so that revenue is coming in more than property taxes have gone up. Now we're starting to see the pendulum swing the other way, where The state aid has dried up. The state is not increasing the amount of aid that they're giving to school districts as much as they have in the prior years. So I would expect that to level out so that that 50% that the state is paying and the 40% of the tax levy probably equal to 45%. It would be roughly half and half. So besides state aid, our local property taxes that we collect from the community make up $42 million, or 40.9%. And then everything else is roughly 10% of our budget. So everything else is pretty insignificant compared to those two major sources of revenue. We receive a county sales tax apportionment from Monroe County. They collect sales tax on everything that's sold, and then they share it with all the school districts. So our portion of that revenue is $4.5 million, or 4.4%. Fund balance, as we said, that's our savings accounts that we're utilizing to not need to levy tax. That number is up to $2.6 million, 2.6% of the revenue budget. And then everything else that we charge fees for, collect interest, receive refunds, or any other revenue makes up 2% of the budget, just $2 million. The estimated tax rate. So this is going to be an interesting thing for this year. Last year was interesting in that all 4 towns that make up the district had different equalization rates and therefore had different tax rates. This year, we have 3 towns that reassessed their properties and are now at 100% equalization rate, and they'll have the same tax rate, but where they were last year to where they are this year is drastically different. So if we look at one of the towns as an example, so in the town of Ogden last year, their equalization rate was 69%. That means that the state views the assessments that the town of Ogden had made as underassessed, not equal to the fair market value of what the properties are actually worth. So that's been changed for this year, and now they're at 100%. So now the assessed value for the properties in the town of Ogden should roughly be what the fair market value is of those properties. So what the impact to the tax rate, last year you can see there was a tax rate of $23.47 per $1,000 of assessment. We're estimating that to drop to $14.45 per thousand. So where people are seeing large increases in their assessment, the tax rate drops to kind of offset. Everyone's individual circumstances will be different depending on how much their assessment has changed compared to that of the whole town and across the 4 different towns in the district. But for the most part, and for the part that the school district plays in the process, the tax levy is up 2.77%. So anything beyond that you see in your tax bill is really a result of assessment changes in your property or your neighbors. And again, I always want to put the caveat that these are just estimates based on what the assessors give us at a period of time when we ask them for an estimate. So all of this is still subject to change. I know the towns are in the middle of reassessing property, and people have the ability to challenge their assessments. So these numbers likely will change, but we're optimistic that they'll be in the right ballpark. This chart at the bottom is a little difficult to see, but I think it's a good one that helps for the community to understand where we lie with our neighboring districts across the county. So each of these blue lines is a school district in the Monroe County, and ours is the 4th from the bottom, and this is the tax rates across the county. So we have the 4th lowest tax rate in all of the counties, and this is based on last year. So as you can see, we're anticipating our true value, our 100% tax rate, to go down. So if everyone else stays where they are, we might jump a spot and be number 3. So it's important, especially in a community like ours where we don't have a lot of commercial property. Some of these other ones that are on the list that are below us have large malls or a lot of commercial property. So for the average taxpayer in our community, we're keeping the rate low, and it's very much by design, it's very much on purpose, because we recognize the sensitivity around who's paying the taxes. It's being paid by residents, not necessarily a commercial property, someone who's making money from having a presence here. It's people who live here. So that's always kind of underlining the way we put the budget together and how we present it. Contingent budget process, just so everyone's aware, we have a budget vote in 2 weeks. If the budget is unsuccessful, the Board of Education will have two opportunities to move forward. They can present an amended budget or the same budget to the community for a revote. The other option that they have is to go to a contingent budget, Under a contingent budget, the property tax levy cannot increase at all, and certain expenses have to be removed. So some of those things, some student supplies, some raises for non-union employees, our school bus purchases would have to come out of the budget, and we could not increase property tax levy at all. Under that situation, our contingent budget would be an overall budget that's reduced by almost $1.9 million. And that's what would happen if the budget were defeated.
So we have several propositions this year. The first is always the proposed budget. So as Matt indicated, the proposed budget is $103,303,515. Our second proposition, which should also look familiar to you, each year we do look to replace our buses. So we are asking the community to support the purchase of 8 66-passenger diesel buses. The next proposition is a little new for us, and it is to purchase 1 66-passenger electric bus, and you can see the estimated cost is about 2.5 times that cost of diesel. But there are bus incentive programs and state money, so Matt's going to talk to you a little bit about that.
So electric buses, for anyone who's not familiar, New York State has a mandate that all school district transportation will become zero emission by 2035. That process really starts in 2027. So after 2027, the district will no longer be able to purchase gas or diesel school buses. So we have a limited timeline to start this transition and to fully make it. We have currently 101 school buses. So for the district to fully transition all of those buses, as you can imagine, is a little bit of a lift in terms of the logistics surrounding it, but also financially. So we've come up with kind of 2 ways to hopefully make this a little bit easier transition for the community. And the first one is included in this proposition is to start with 1 electric bus. So the ask to the community is if we can purchase 1 bus, and as Lori alluded to, it is about 2.5 times more expensive. Currently, the state is offering incentive programs to help school districts bridge this gap because they do recognize it is an increased cost. We are expecting that we will receive program rebates of $220,500 to help us offset that cost. And then in addition, when you factor in how much transportation aid we expect to get on this bus, because it costs more, we get more aid. When you factor all of that in, the net cost to the community for a school bus, for an electric school bus, is just over $40,000, and that compares to diesel bus net cost is about $32,000. So it's about an $8,000 increased cost after you kind of back out all the aid and the incentives that we anticipate receiving. I think it's important to note financially, this is one way we can transition a little more smoothly. I think on the operational side, it's important to recognize all the challenges that come with this. And so we believe that our best opportunity to learn this new technology is to try it. We have so much, there's only so much you can learn from other people's experience. We need to have hands-on experience with these buses. Our mechanics need to be able to work on them to really understand the nuances that are going to be different from these buses than ones we've had for years. So that's what Proposition 3 really aims to do, is ask the community whether now is a good time for us to try this endeavor. Based on current legislation, we do anticipate needing to make this transition in the next 3 years, because after that we will not be able to buy gas or diesel buses. And Proposition 4 is very similar to that. So Proposition 4 is asking the community to establish a capital reserve, so like a savings account, with the specific purpose of setting aside money for school buses. And not just electric school buses, but these buses could also be diesel. So really the idea is set aside money now for increased costs that we anticipate seeing in the future for buses and also the related infrastructure. So electric school buses, for example, also need a charger. So that's why the proposition's worded to cover both the bus itself, but also any ancillary equipment that would be needed in order to make the bus functional. The $15 million is really just an upper limit. So this is not an ask to the community for $15 million. It's really just to establish an account that we could then set aside money, so in the future, we can purchase electric or diesel buses from that pot of money.
Yep, so later this evening, we will hear from our candidates for the Board of Education. So we do have a 9-member board, and each year, 3 members will step off the board and then decide if they would like to run for the Board of Education or not. This year, 2 of our 3 incumbents are running again. Dr. Cheryl Repass has decided not to run again, and I'd like to thank Cheryl for her service. And then they're randomly drawn once they're submitted. 5 o'clock a couple Mondays ago, names into a hat we drew out, and this is the order that they'll be seen on the ballot, in the order tonight in which you'll hear from our candidates. So Catherine Arzuega, Jonathan Payne, Alicia Nagel, and Colleen Parker. And then voter qualifications, I'm sure you're familiar with, a U.S. citizen having lived in our school district 30 days prior to the vote and 18 years of age. As in the past, the absentee ballot is available. What is new this year to all of school districts across New York State is an early voter ballot. So if you are interested in voting early, still you would contact our district clerk, Michelle Penner, and then that application would be provided to you, and more information is on our website about that. So with that, that ends our portion. Oh, Matt's got a question already to answer?
We did have one question come in before the presentation. So the question was how much money the district had put into capital reserve at the end of last year. So currently the school district has a capital reserve specific to building projects. Last year, the Board of Education put $5.5 million in that to bring the total to $6 million. So currently we have a $6 million capital reserve specific for the purpose of future building projects. So again, to the proposition number 4, that one is specific to school buses. So it has to be a separate reserve set up for that separate purpose. Hopefully that answered the question. Are there any other questions? Tom? Sure.
Okay. 3 comments. 1, thank you to Lori for her service. And through thick and thin with this. Thank you to Cheryl and all the board members, but thank you to Cheryl for her service. And then finally, I remember when I first got on the board a long time ago, retirees coming in and talking about tax rates and assessments. Mine just about doubled. So your reduction is not going to cover that. My pension hasn't changed. My Social Security went up. But I remember the business manager saying, well, your house is worth a lot more. Well, it was an investment. This is my home for 45 years. I'd like to be there a long time. So I get it. But, you know, when I see something jump at that amount, that reduction doesn't take care of it. So I want the board to be very cognizant of that. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I don't want to cut anyone off. All right. Thank you, everyone.